This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for Avoid the Maze. You are special. And my guest today is Jennifer Celeste Briggs. That's a mouthful early in the morning, Celeste, Jennifer. Um, and when I read Jennifer's bio, it just hit a chord for me because I happen to be the mother of a special needs individual who probably doesn't have as many special needs as we were told he had. And so it changed our life for a long time. We treated him sadly like many other people, like he was this alien from outer space. So we had to do all these special things. And the interesting thing was, Jennifer, I finally learned when he was in his 20s, if I would just meet him where he was, guess what? He blossomed. And it made such a difference in his life, our life, and everything that he has done going forward. So, welcome to this program and give us a background as to where you're coming from. And I know you wrote a book, and I'm sure it's going to help our listeners.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, so I wrote a book called Watching Sarah Rise, A Journey of Thriving with Autism. And it's about my journey with my daughter, Sarah, who just turned 18. So it's a totally different world than when she was very, very little. The book starts with our early years of struggle, first not even having a diagnosis. Then, even once we had a diagnosis, it's like, well, that kind of helps. And everybody is so different. How did we figure out how to help her? And we tried a million different things. And ultimately, one of the things that I did was I went to the Autism Treatment Center of America in Massachusetts, and I learned to run a sunrise program. And I called the program Sarah Rise because it was for Sarah. And I trained volunteers, and we were giving her anywhere from half an hour to 8 hours a day of one-on-one time, meeting her where she was, following her lead, following her interests, never forcing interaction, never forcing eye contact, but always inviting and encouraging and believing in her. And that made a tremendous difference. And her language went from basically nothing to I couldn't keep up with all the new things. And it started being silly at the end of the day when I would tell my husband, oh, she said this. It's like, of course she said a new word. Of course she learned 5 new words this week, which is incredible. And honestly, I still marvel when I see her. Yesterday, we went for a walk and she was scootering and we're helping her learn to cross streets by herself. And she was doing that. And because in the early days, we didn't know if she would learn to crawl, walk, talk, feed herself, use the toilet, anything. It still feels like a miracle when I watch her doing something or hear her talking and smiling and going off to her piano lesson. It still amazes me.
And it's interesting because my son was diagnosed in the mid 90s. And at that point, it was still questionable like, what is this? He fits it, but he doesn't fit it. And I kept
Mm,
asking that question, well, what does that mean? And we were lucky to have a wonderful neurologist who sat me down one day and he said, I'm going to treat him. I'm going to help him where I can with medication to make him fit in more. But I'm going to listen to him. When he says, this is not working for me, he says, I'm going to make changes. He said, but in the meantime, you need to go for therapy. And sadly, therapy did not work for us because they would tell him, these are the things we want you to do. And if you do these, mom and dad are going to reward you. Well, at 6 years old, he came home and the first thing he said was, I'm not a puppy dog. And it was like, oh my God. Like, but your therapist said if you do XYZ, you can have gummy bears. And he goes, then I don't want them. And it became this conflict. And we kept going back and forth to therapy, not understanding and not meeting him where he was. Um, and so I applaud you for number one, going out and doing some more research so that you could understand your daughter more. But we have to learn also to be excited about the milestones. And that was something we were not excited about because we didn't understand it. So your daughter is at one end of the spectrum, my son's on the other end of the spectrum, but they both have the same diagnosis. How is that possible?
I know. I think about that a lot. And yet it would be complicated to come up with different groupings within that because everybody can be so, so different. And yet, if you go out in the world and say, oh, my daughter has autism, then people sometimes assume something very different than whatever is the truth for her and her experience.
Exactly. So tell me a little bit about this organization because I've never heard about them. Um, you say they're in Massachusetts. How did you learn about them? Because so many of us, we're sort of stuck in our little niche wherever we live. And whoever gave us the diagnosis, we just sort of go with, okay, fine, what should I do next? But you researched it. How did you find them?
Actually, my research and finding them were completely accidental in college many years before Sarah was born. My mom and stepdad gave me books by Barry Neil Kaufman. He's known as Bears, and his wife is Samaria Light Kaufman. And they are the ones that started the Autism Treatment Center of America. They ran a program that they completely came up with on their own for their son, Ron. When he was diagnosed as severely autistic, they were told to put him in an institution. They looked at the institutions. They were like, that's not really what we want for him. We really believe that there is nothing wrong with him and they wanted him to know that he was loved. And so they started working with him in their bathroom because that didn't have a lot of distractions, and they would join his repetitive behaviors. So if he wanted to spin a plate, they would spin a plate in the way of really trying to say, what is fascinating here? What is important about this plate spinning? It's not just copying him, it's really joining his world. And they did that, and they had volunteers. They did that for about 12 hours a day for 3 years, and he completely transformed. He went from not responding to his world and finding it very stressful to being able to easily interact and go off to school and went to college and was the global director of the Autism Treatment Center of America. He's married. Now he has his own business, still helping families with kids with autism. And people started hearing about what Bears and Samaria had done and coming to them saying, can you please teach me? Can you help me? And that's when they were like, maybe we should start a place. And then, many years later, I was one of those people. And Bears wrote a book called Sunrise, which I read and I thought it was amazing. I even did a summer program at the Option Institute, which is a sort of sister company, and it's based on helping adults look at their own beliefs that are getting in their way of their happiness in their life so that you're not a victim of your life. You're saying, oh, am I actually thinking I'm a terrible person? And that's getting in my way because I'm telling myself no before someone else does, or whatever it might be. So I had done a program there. I had read the book. I thought it was amazing. I thought maybe I would like to run a Sunrise program one day. And then all of that kind of was in my back pocket. And along came Sarah, and it was totally stressful. She was diagnosed as failure to thrive. I mean, there was also a lot of joy and wonder, and she was the cutest kid we'd ever seen.
Sure.
And it was very hard to get her to eat enough. And I didn't want a feeding tube. And it was hard to get her to raise her head during tummy time. Instead of raising her head up like kids are supposed to, she would press her forehead into the carpet. It was like, well, here she's upset and it's not even doing the thing it's supposed to do. So a lot of the early years were just trying to help get through those moments. And we had PT and OT and speech, and we tried conductive education and water therapy and horseback riding therapy once she had progressed to being
Right.
able to ride a horse. And it was basically when she was 4.5 and things were easier, but still a struggle. And she wasn't talking. And I thought, well, what if there's something more? What if I try running a sunrise program? And they do offer intensives for parents. So you could go for a week with your child and they work with your kid, they work with you, and you come away with a lot of information and maybe seeing your kid make some great changes. So at first I thought, oh, we'll just do that. I'll go up and they'll fix her and then we'll go on with our life. And I talked to their family specialist and just to sort of say, hey, here's our situation. And they really advised that I come for the training and start running a program myself so that I would understand that I could make a difference. And it wasn't just going to be them making the difference for her. So ultimately, we never did an intensive. I had my mom come with me for the first week-long training because my youngest daughter, Amy, was a baby. So she couldn't be away from me.
Sure.
And then Sarah stayed at home with my husband, Carl. His sister flew across the country to help him for that week. It was an amazing week where I hadn't realized how guilty I felt about her situation and how responsible I felt that I should be doing more, 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 more. And yet feeling so guilty about it actually was getting in my way of doing more and of being creative. So I learned how to set up a program, how to set up a special room that would not have distractions, how to work with her to help with language, eye contact, how to realize when she was ready to interact and when she was not, how to find volunteers, how to train volunteers and give them feedback. So I did that week of training. I came back. We were moving to a new house. That was complicated. So at first, I really wasn't running a program in my mind, but I had changed the way I thought about Sarah and thought about how to work for language and how to connect with her. And so even without having any specific program going, I started interacting differently and her language started to come more as soon as I was asking for it differently and waiting for it differently. And that was so exciting. So then we moved to a new house. I started getting helpers. I had helpers. Some people volunteered to make food. Some people would come and hang out with Amy so that I could be with Sarah. And then I also had a bunch of people that I trained to work with Sarah. And then we would have team meetings once every month to get together and say, okay, where are we struggling? What do we want to work on? What are the focus goals this month? And that changed over the years of how many volunteers I had. My sister-in-law actually completely moved. It wasn't just the 1 week that she moved to help us, although she did that a few times because there are other training sessions too. But then she moved to Pittsburgh to be my full-time helper for a few years, and that was incredible.
One of the things I'm hearing, you had a lot of wonderful family support,
Yes.
and that doesn't always happen.
For sure. I was
Uh,
very, very lucky, including some people don't even have their spouse on board.
right.
And I can't imagine doing that without my husband's full support.
When my son was 6 years old when he was diagnosed, we had no concept before then that there was anything. He had friends, he was active, he was learning, he was right on par, if not ahead. Um, but I had remembered little things that were different about him from the time he was born. He would not nurse. He didn't know how to suck on a bottle. But nobody told us what this might mean. In fact, I felt very guilty because I wanted to nurse him. And so we basically had a tube that I put on my breast and I would squirt it into his mouth so that I could feel like I was accomplishing something. Um, and then before we knew it, he was sucking on a bottle. So did we teach him or was he just lazy? Nobody knew. And there were other things. And when he was in preschool, teacher called me one day and said, there's something terribly wrong with your son. I said, what? And she said, he loves to bang his head on the floor. So I take him to the doctor, and the doctor, wonderful doctor, says, Mrs. Hale, do not worry. When it starts to hurt, he'll stop. And we watched him, and to some degree that was true, but he always had bruises on his forehead. So I took him for evaluation. Nothing came up. And so we said, okay, this is just an overactive kid, whatever. But at 6 years old, he was in first grade, and the alarm went off for the fire drill for the first time. And he went underneath his desk and refused to move. And they called us and said, this is not acceptable. And I said, okay, he doesn't like loud sounds. We had taken him to amusement parks because he wanted to go, but he couldn't handle it. He'd walk around with his hands over his ears. So there were signs, but nobody was helping us. But it was the school who finally said, go get him diagnosed. Problem is, he got diagnosed and he wore that label all the way through high school. And because he wore the label, mom and dad wore the label. We were the parents of an autistic child. And yet he thrived in school. He was personable. He had eye contact. He could make conversation, but certain sounds, certain smells, certain situations, he would fall apart. So I want parents to understand that, again, like Jennifer said, our kids are all different, whether they're on the spectrum or not. And we have to meet all of our kids where they are. So your training, without even probably realizing it, when you got home and you started using some of these things, you said you started to see a difference in Sarah. Were you feeling guilty before that? And now, after you took the training, feeling a little less guilty?
Yeah, I felt tremendously guilty, even just in terms of was I doing enough of what the PT and OT said to do? You know, they'd leave me with assignments to be helpful, but then Sarah has always preferred to do certain things with other people, not me. If I tell her, like for piano now, she doesn't want me around for her piano practice. She
Yeah.
loves her piano lessons, but she doesn't want me there. She loves interacting with me for other things. And I was super helpful in terms of helping her learn to speak. I think I was one of the best people to be at the forefront of that. But for other skills, not so much. And she just found it so challenging to do some of the things for OT and PT, and so would get really frustrated. So I kept feeling like, oh, if only I had done XYZ differently, she would be in a different place. And then after I got trained for that first week, I wasn't feeling guilty. I was more feeling empowered of like, oh, I know what to do now. Yeah, this is a big task. This is a big thing to set up, but I know the steps to take. Let me just start with asking some people for some help. Let me just spend half an hour a day focusing on Sarah in the ways that I had learned. And it was so rewarding to see her change. That also helped me drop the guilt because it was like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, things are suddenly clicking for her and we're having more fun together. We're not clashing as much because she and I are both strong-willed and I can think, oh, I need this to go a certain way. And she can think, no, I do not want to do it that certain way. And then boom, we're yelling at each other. And that's not fun for either of us. So this really helped reduce the stress level for both of us. I wasn't trying to do anything else except be with her when I was in the room doing my Sarah Rise time. I was not hearing my phone. I was not seeing the mail. I was not hearing the needs of my other kid because someone else was with her. So I could really, really focus. And Sarah also could focus more because there weren't other sounds. There weren't things on the wall. There wasn't something, well, she could look out the window, but it was a lot quieter. It just felt like this magical, quiet space. And if she wanted to open and close a lid for half an hour, I was there to open and close a lid for half an hour. And we spent a ton of time quietly being together not forcing the interaction. But then if she looked at me for a second, then I could say something and help her learn one new thing and celebrate whatever attempt she made to speak.
So, how did she interact with her younger sister? Because, you know, some of the things that she was going through, even though she was progressing, you know, age wise, maybe she wasn't. And so now there's this little baby there. Now the baby starts crawling. Now the baby starts walking. Now the baby starts talking. Was it exciting for her or was that stressful for her?
She has always liked babies, including now she loves babies, especially crying babies. So she enjoyed having a sister. I think from the earliest moments she was interested. And then for sometimes they were pretty much in sync with their abilities. And I was changing both of their diapers at the same time, you know? Um, and then over time, Amy actually has developmentally surpassed Sarah. And so I think of it as Sarah is the older and the younger sister, and Amy is the younger and the older sister. And that transition happened really smoothly, and they still can play together and have a good time. It's just now Amy will sometimes be the one to help instead of maybe needing help. And
Right.
occasionally, Sarah was the one actually to be more comfortable in some social situations when they were little. And then Amy would find comfort in being next to Sarah and having someone that she knew. And I think having Amy was also very, very helpful for Sarah because she found other kids so fascinating. She would just watch them, or she'd turn her head kind of halfway and be watching their feet. And it was I'm not sure if overwhelming is the right word, but it was a lot for her to take in. So she wasn't really interacting with other kids easily. But Amy was someone that she could get to know. So although not necessarily predictable, still a little bit predictable. Like, okay, this is a known quantity of a person. And Amy could help Sarah learn to play in a way that no adult could ever do, no matter how silly we let ourselves be, because we just weren't kids. So we were always, I think, helpfully and rightfully watching for Sarah's lead. Oh, is she ready to interact? Is she not? And Amy would come along, and maybe if they were in the bath together, she'd just pick up a toy and squirt Sarah in the face with water, which I would never have done. And Sarah would laugh and squirt Amy back or just enjoy the moment. And so it was really helpful to have Amy just being full on kid and asking 100% of Sarah, not knowing she was any different from anyone else.
That is interesting because um, my son, we have his cousins who are on the spectrum. And from the time that they were a baby, my son became their protector. Now we live a distance away, but every time we'd go into town, he understood them even before they got diagnosed. In fact, he was probably about 14 years old. And he said to me one day, you know, they're on the spectrum, Mom. And I said, how do you know? And he pointed out little things, but and they were totally different, male and female, both on the spectrum. His male cousin acted like he was more profoundly affected than his female cousin, which now has turned around as they've gotten older, very interestingly. But
Yeah.
my son knew how to talk to them, and their mother would just sit there like totally amazed. She went to classes, she did everything to try to engage with them, and she did well. But when he would come in town, they gravitated to him, and he knew how to respond to them. And this is what helped his growth when he started to realize that now I see what people think I'm supposed to be like. I'm not, but they don't have to be like that either. They can do other things. And he would find the things that they were very good in. His male cousin learned Japanese on his own. Just all of a sudden, one day, he started talking Japanese and
Wow.
went to college and got a degree in Japanese history. It's like we all sat around and said, "What are you going to do with that?" And he said, "I'm going to learn," because that was important to him. And that's about the time that my son said, "Mom, join me in my life." And it was like, okay, I see what you're saying. I can't I can't tell you what to do because you're going to do what you want to do. I can save you from getting hurt. I can protect you in that way, but I have to let you live your life. And it's got to be it's difficult for all of us, no matter where they are. So you talk about this walk you went on yesterday with Sarah. Um, and there are some parents who are maybe listening and they didn't pick up on her age, but she's, if I walked down the street and saw her, I'd see this young teenager. And yet you knew how to be happy with showing her to make sure that she could cross the street properly. Some parents would be saying, "Oh, but shouldn't you have done that when she was 2 years old?" But she wasn't ready at 2 or 3, I'm sure.
And some skills take a very, very long time. We've been working on the crossing a street and how to look for traffic and really look for years. But I think that's the thing that, sure, in the early years, we didn't know if she would learn to do things. But at some point, our mentality shifted. And certainly there may be still questions of we don't know the whole shape of her life, but it became more a question of when. So we fully do believe that she can learn to cross streets safely, even if it takes many, many years. It took her years to learn to swim, and she's still working on perfecting her form and still has a swim teacher, but she can swim. And it took her years to learn to ride a bike, but she can ride a bike. So it's just that we understand that it might take her a lot longer, but we keep giving her the input and the opportunity.
Absolutely. So give us a little insight in the book. What are some of the things that we might find in the book that are going to be aha moments, especially for those of us who either are raising kids on the spectrum or maybe raising them in the future?
I think one part is the idea of not stopping a repetitive behavior, but of joining it, and that is actually the doorway in, and that is the one of the main ideas behind the Sunrise program. And I write about that a lot and how that helped connect with Sarah, and that we would have these times of opening and closing a lid or putting markers into a container, and then the play times that evolved from that, and how I would think about how to build on her ideas. And then also that it's really okay for a parent not to have figured everything out and to have times of struggle and have times of crying on the kitchen floor. Because I had that before and during the program
Yeah.
where I just felt so maxed out or stressed, or I just didn't know. And in the moment, then you can feel like, oh gosh, I've totally screwed this up. I am the worst parent ever. It's too bad my kid has me. But actually, then to pick yourself back up off the floor, like find someone to listen to your feelings or cry into a pillow, and then you feel better. And then, okay, you can regroup, you can come back and connect with your kids. They can also have moments where they're not their best self. They're
Right.
screaming and maybe everyone's screaming together. And then, at least in my family, we come back to being all snuggly and we love each other and we try again and we try again and we try again. So I was really, really imperfect if I were to describe it. And I kept at it and ran this amazing program, and she progressed beyond anyone's wildest dreams, and it was life-changing for everybody. So I guess that's the main thing I hope people do get from the book, is that they don't have to have all their ducks in a row first and just making tiny changes. Even if one day you're able to make the change and meet your kid where they are, and the next day, gosh, you're overwhelmed, you're stressed, your period is starting, you are not there. Well, but then the next day you are, or the next hour you are.
It's interesting because I doubted myself almost the whole time. Um, while he was living at home, I was raising him. In fact, he lived at home through his 20s because of his work situation. And it wasn't until he moved away that I realized he really was a young adult because even when he was living with us and he was driving and going to work and doing things, when he still came home, he was still my young son. I didn't, I couldn't separate that because he had never truly moved away. But the first time he moved away, he moved over 1,000 miles away to take a job that he wanted. He packed up his car. He wouldn't even let me help him pack. When I was trying to make suggestions, it's like, Mom, I got this. Um, he had flown down to Texas the week before, found an apartment, um, did all this on his own. And I'm sitting back saying, I know you have this ability, but you've been living in our house. And to me, you're still this teenager. But I had to, at that moment, like that, say, it's okay. And like any empty nester, I cried my eyes out as he drove away. But the thing that changed was from the day that he drove away, from that point forward, every day he calls me at least once a day. And if he feels he's going to have a meltdown, I'm his rock. And I went to visit him a couple weeks ago. He's now living a little closer. He's in Indiana. And we were sitting there and he kept saying, Mom, I wanted to do all these things with you, but we're just sitting. I'm so sorry. And I said, that's okay. I said, we're together. If you want to say something to me, he'll tell me. If you don't want to say anything to me, then we're staring at a TV, but we're breathing the same air. And he said, what happened to you? And I said, when you were living with us, you were still my little boy. I knew what age you were. I saw you progressing, but you were still a little boy. And I felt responsible. I said, I feel responsible because I'm a parent now, but it's not my job. And he just looked at me and he goes, Mom, I really like you. And to me, that was better than him telling me that he loves me because he tells me all the time he loves me. So that's sort of like, yeah, yeah, yeah. But to tell me that he likes me. And now we can talk about the things that I thought we did poorly. And some of those things he looks at me and goes, you're absolutely right. You are terrible. He said, I would raise my voice and your voice would go 2 octaves higher. And he was right because I wanted to be right. I wanted to it's okay. You don't have to be depressed. But the reality of it is, he has every right to feel what he feels. So, how's it now for you having an 18-year-old living in your home? You know she's progressing, but you don't know how much further it's going to go. How do you feel about today and the future?
I feel good and I feel hopeful, and I have no idea how things will really go. But with everything that's an unknown, I remind myself of how many wonderful people we have had come into our life and especially her life so far. And so, why does it have to be any different going forward? And just trusting that we will keep finding the right place, the right people, the right programs. And like you were saying about realizing that they are more independent, that's been a lifelong thing that I think half the time the issue of her not progressing is that I am over functioning and I am doing too much, and how to keep prying my fingers off the
Yeah.
control panel and let her do it, but still be close enough to help if she needs it. That's one area where I think it's really helpful to have two parents. My husband is a lot more relaxed about letting her try things, letting her maybe fall off a bike. Oh gosh, I could not be the one to teach her to ride a bike at all because at every wobble I would be and wanting to grab the bike. And he was like, "Well, if she falls off, she'll put her foot down or
Yeah,
she'll get a little scrape, whatever." So it was really good. Even with crossing the street, I could see he was a little more relaxed. Or getting her to make her own breakfast on the weekends and how much do I need to hover and how much can I step back? And I'm getting much better at stepping back, and she can do so much. And I think she likes feeling independent and she likes being helpful around the house. She loves to take out the trash. But do I think to ask her to do it? No. Every once in a while, she'll just decide to do it. So it's a real learning curve for me, almost as much as it is for her, I think.
yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because my husband found out in his 50s that he also is on the spectrum, which gave him like, okay, yeah, I know I've always been different. His mother used to say he marches to the beat of a different drummer, and he does, but I just thought those were the quirky things that I just fell in love with, which they were. Um, but my husband was always able to fix anything around the house. He could look at it, go get a screwdriver, a hammer, whatever. And he always wanted to teach our son how to do this. And Alex had no interest, just no interest. He didn't even want to hand him tools. It was like, do I really have to do this? Interestingly, since he's moved away, he's put furniture together that he's bought at IKEA. Um, when I was visiting him, a light bulb needed to be changed, and he took out the ladder and climbed up on the ladder and changed it. And I said, "You never wanted to learn these things." He said, "Well, I saw Dad doing it. I didn't have to participate." He said, "But if I don't do it now, who's going to?" And so I came home and I told my husband, I said, "You're not going to believe it. He bought a drill. He's got tools." And he goes, "Does he use them?" I said, "Yeah, he uses them." He goes, "How did he learn?" He just did
Wow.
when it was important to him. And so that's what I'm hearing with Sarah. If it becomes important to her, she doesn't want the trash there. She knows it should go outside. She's going to do it. Now she knows how to make breakfast, She may be doing it on the weekend. She may start doing it all the time. You might find her cooking dinner for you one of these nights.
She does actually. She helps my husband a couple nights a week. He makes dinner and she is his helper, especially if there's a sauce. She loves making a sauce, but she also can peel carrots and chop carrots. And that again was something where I had to be like, oh, okay, she has a knife. But actually, it's much safer to teach her to use it than to not, and then think later she might try and not have had the supervision.
Exactly. Well, how can we find your book? Because I think there are a lot of parents out there who are going to gain some real insight. And, you know, I'm looking forward to reading it as well.
Oh, thank you. My website is watchingsarahrise.com, and that has links, but it's just links to Barnes& and Noble, Bookshop, Simon and Schuster, Amazon. So anywhere that people like to buy books online or in person, they can find it. Many small bookstores might not stock it, but they can order it. It's also available for Kindle, and I did the audiobook myself.
Sounds wonderful. Well, thank you for joining us today. This has
Thank
been
you.
very enlightening. Please give our love to Sarah. I look forward to hearing about more of her progress. And for those of you who are out there, um, when you find out that there's somebody in your child's classroom that's on the spectrum, please stop making assumptions. Also, please know that families need your support and your love. Um, I had a loving family, but they weren't supportive initially. My mother took the old adage, well, you had him late in life. Maybe that's why. And I just wanted to cry. It was like for the first 6 years, she saw him as being normal. Okay. and now it's my fault. Um, but then again, I heard family members saying, so when's he going to grow out of it? And he's not going to grow out of it. He's going to learn to live with it. And that's what Sarah's doing as well. And God bless her and to all that you have done for her. So have a wonderful day.
Thanks. You
Thank
too.
you. Bye bye now.
Bye.